You knew it would take me 2 hours to get the sound to work, right? Okay. All right, so we are switching over right now. Again, this is, we're going to switch over. Whoops, here we go. That was more Don Slepian. We're switching over to the composer panel. Is everybody here?
I'm here.
Okay, Brian, let's see if we can get your video on.
I'm unmuted on my end.
Ask to start video. Don. David, are you here? David Barron? Okay, he'll be joining us, I'm sure. Huh. Oh, okay. We have a technical glitch. I hope David comes shortly. Anyway, so again, we're going to have a concert after this, and then times for some more Q&A as we close. I want to introduce Brian Kehu. I probably met Brian long before we ever set eyes on each other at NAMM. He's a Los Angeles-based producer, engineer, and musician, and he is best known for co-authoring Recording the Beatles, which is a technical look at the Fab Four's recordings. He's worked as a programmer for Moog, Alesis, John Bowen, Solaris, and Casio, and he's played keyboard with The Who, Moog Cookbook, Hole, Dave Davies, and many others. I'm really happy to see you here from California. We have a lot of time zones going on. This is kind of crazy. Don Slepian goes under the group of people who's known me since I was about 3.5 feet tall. Don met me when I was 7 or 8 in Hawaii when he was working for Peter Caraccio.
Yes.
Yes. And he's been working with ARP 2500s for, I guess, about as long as they've been in existence. So Don lends his own source of expertise. I love his music. I have to say that it's become part of my morning ritual to listen to him. Pablo Garton is a Chilean-born musician, composer who lives in Cologne. He's going to be giving us a little concert in a little bit after we answer some questions. And I will introduce David when he comes in, and I'm sure he'll show up. This is the nature of Zoom, right? All right. All right, so let's go ahead and start some self-introductions. I'd like you to talk a little bit, Don, and Pablo first. And then we're going to bring in Asha Tamarisa as well. Are you here, Asha? Oh, I don't know. I can't hear. Oh, okay.
He's here.
Okay, can you unmute? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to bring in Asha as well and Dave Barron all together. All right, take it away, Brian.
I wanted to ask you all if you have a feeling for the particular voice or the sound of an ARP synthesizer. Like, is it sonically different, especially the 2500, from other instruments out there?
Interesting question. I would say that it's hard to separate the sound from an instrument from your technique in playing it, you know, how you work with it, how you relate to it. I know that I make a different sound with the ARP than I would with another instrument. So it's hard to separate the instrument and the composer and performer. So I think all these instruments have a unique sound, and it depends on us as performers, as musicians, as composers, to what sound, you know, is characteristic of it.
Anybody else have experience with the ARP sound, if there is one?
Well, hello. Well, in my case, I think like the sound of this ARP in particular is like very unique because it haven't been repaired in, I don't know, like never probably. So I don't know exactly how the ARP sound is, but like the way the age give like evolution to the sound of this synthesizer is really unique. And then yeah, like for me this specific synthesizer is it's like no other in terms of its sonic capabilities.
I think I first noticed a tonal difference when I heard Funeral for a Friend, an Elton John record. His producer and programmer, David Henschel, made a great track layering the ARP 2500, and then Pete Townsend with Quadrophenia. You can really hear there's a beautiful high end. The treble aspect of it is very sparkly and clear. And if anybody compares the 2600, which is a bit darker and a bit more mid-range and aggressive, they have a beautiful sound out of the 2500 that has that gorgeous sparkle. All the frequencies are there. I find for those of you that perform, I want to know how you feel about controls. We talked about the human interface and the tactile differences, but the ARP is an instrument, as many at the time didn't have touch control on the keyboard, doesn't have a ribbon or wheels to pitch bend and so forth. What features do you like as far as physical control on the ARP?
I love the ARPs. I found them really performable. The 2500 was really tough on stage, and the moment it hit it, a colored light would hit it. You couldn't see the colors on the matrix switches anymore. That was a tough one to play on stage. But we were a full service ARP dealer, so we sold the entire ARP line. We taught classes and demonstrated them and composed with them. For me, the performance was really 2600s and ARP Odyssey and the Soloist. In other words, the smaller, more compact ARPs are how we played with it. With the bigger ones, what I did is I used a lot of pedals, both volume pedals, switch pedals, and I drew out control voltages to pedals. So I found that I needed both my hands and my feet in order to really play the ARP. I found them very responsive. They tracked beautifully as long as you gave them good, stable control voltage coming in.
Are there certain modules that you guys respond to stronger, like the sequencer systems, or certain people have favorites, just like you do when you're a cook? You have certain flavors you like to play with.
For sure. I would say that the multimode filter resonator was something we were passionate about. It was wonderful for processing external audio as well as using inside the 2500.
Anybody else want to weigh in on their 2500 experience?
I was just gonna say your question about what is particular, or does the ARP have a particular, or the 2500 have a particular sound? Obviously you can change the number of steps in the sequencer, but the 10-step sequencer I feel like is something that is pretty obtuse and unique about the instrument, and kind of gives it a different temporal or metric sense than other synthesizers. Obviously, of course, that is, you can change that, but and then also the filters I feel like are pretty audible, very unique sounding filters.
Yeah, for sure.
Distinctive. Go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry, I just joined. I'm sorry. I just ran in, but I was going to say, like, I think from my point of view, I have a pretty large collection of modular synthesizers, and the ARP is, like, I feel like it's utterly unique, and probably the two things that make it the most unique the first thing that makes it unique is the patching system, obviously, but the sound of the filters, the multi-mode filter is incredible. I think it's one of my favorite filters, and I think I don't know if there's much to compare it to. Maybe Emu's UAF, which I think was a copy of the multi-mode filter from what I've read online. But it doesn't have that, it doesn't feel like a Moog filter at all, which is kind of incredible that those things came out kind of somewhat within the same time period. I use it a ton, believe it or not, for sub bass on pop records, and like a lot of times I'll try a mini Moog and it sounds like a mini Moog, and I'm like, I need a sub bass that's kind of got a little bit of creamy dirt to it, and I actually get that really well out of the multi-mode. It's actually a kind of a modern sounding bass synth. Probably the most expensive bass synth in the world, but a pretty awesome one. And I think that the other thing that makes the ARP 2500 utterly unique from my point of view is the mix sequencer. It's a really interesting module, and it's really interesting how you can clock it, and you can use it to do all kinds of interesting things with control voltages fed to each other. It's not like the Buchla system where it's like, or Surge or something, where it's based on all these kind of computational logical things. It just sort of has a simple logic, and it's crazy how, especially if you get confused about your patching, how awesome it can be. Because all of a sudden you have these sort of happy mistakes and accidents that happen on the 25. And a lot of that is the patching, and also probably my eyes, which have never been great. And they get, you know, so sometimes I'll be sending what I think is audio to someplace and video that, and then control voltage, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have the coolest patch ever. I should write this down, and then I don't. It just becomes like part of like a process of discovery. But I think that's built into, like, that makes the 2500 in a weird way, like sort of like a very creative piece, like kind of like the EMS synth is very creative because of the patch, which basically never works. And it kind of works, and that sort of process of it, like, well, it kind of works and it doesn't really work. It gives you some of the magical sounds, and that's when you're like, oh, record it right now, because in 3 minutes it's going to have a mind of its own. The ARP is way more stable than, I have a modular Moog and a Synthi, and the ARP is literally like a modern synth, especially if you take care of it. You know, and I mean, I'm actually amazed, of all the instruments I've owned, it's had the least service of anything.
You mentioned also,
But I think there's so.
David, you mentioned happy accidents. Can you explain a bit more? Because Jean-Michel Jarre introduced that at the front of this program, that he would set about with intent and intending to design something, and then being in the zone or in the space, you'd find something that was maybe as good or better.
I mean, I think that's inherent to why we are probably attracted to analog synthesizers instead of plugins anyway. You know, anybody can step through a million things. It's very predictable. It's always in tune, all of that kind of stuff. But when you hook into patching, especially on the 2500, and you have a complex patch going, there's all these interactions, and all of a sudden something will catch your ear, and it's like magic. It's like you didn't even know the synth could make that sound. And here's a synth I've owned for a while, and it's like, wow, that is beautiful. Yeah, I've set out to make bass patches and then made a lead patch, or I all kinds of crazy sort of accidents. But I think that's inherent to synths. But the more complicated patches you have, the more likely you're going to run into something that's, I mean, like, you know, they have the voice module, which is pretty predictable. I mean, it's basically a very simple synth. It's very usable. It sounds amazing, and it's great. It's like one of my favorite all-in-one voice synths. But I use it sometimes, but I frequently just patch everything into everything and sort of go for there. I like a lot of cross modulation, and then you get a lot of surprises. I mean, I don't think timbral diversity of the 2500 has actually been fully explored yet. I mean, that's my opinion. Of course, that's, you know, I'm looking at it probably from you know, can I use it on pop records perspective for the most part? And you can. And I'm always looking for, well, you know, instead of doing pads on an Oberheim, a lot of times I'll do my pads on a plugin, and then I'll map it out to the ARP, 3 voices or 4 voices. And the stability of modulation, it creates, like, you know, a beautiful thing, and no one knows what it is, which kind of I always really like. They're not, oh, you did use a Prophet 5, and I'm always like, no. You know, it's great. I think that's the magic of this.
There's definitely some people like to compose from intent. Some of you there do these long evolving pieces where you're basically improvising live with the synth. And I encourage you viewers to check out the YouTube channels of our panelists, because they have great demonstrations of, you know, working with different synths, but especially the ARP, and showing you sounds that were not happening on most of the recordings made in the 70s when it came out. So many people used synthesis as a commercial thing. And of course, this these are the people who had money, but also universities did it and didn't release a lot of recordings. But now you find people doing 20 and 30 and 50-minute pieces where the ARP is used to evolve sound textures. And can you guys describe that kind of composition versus improvisation?
Raise a hand to that. A style we call ambient electronica. There's one of my pieces called Sea of Bliss. It has slow evolving textures. And now that so many people are able to use these tools, now that they're in the hands of so many more people, first I'd have to say to David Barron's point, we absolutely have not even explored half of what the ARP 2500 can do. There's much more to be learned. And it's exciting to me that a whole nother generation of composers and performers are going to come, and they're going to either virtually or physically encounter this instrument, and we're going to hear sounds we've never heard before. Like everybody else, I love to make complex FM sounds on the 2500 that you just touch it just the tiniest little bit, and you're in another universe. It's amazing. What a great instrument. So this is, now we have the luxury of having 10 or 20 minutes to evolve musical ideas, and we can layer them. And the analogy I come up with, it's sort of like cooking. You're making layers of different things if you're making a cake or a lasagna or whatever. Instead, we're using sound and we're using textures that can slowly evolve. And these are things that the ARP synthesizers do beautifully.
Asha, can you weigh in on your performance things? Do you begin with like a prepared thing where you know which directions you want to go into, or do you just literally improvise from scratch? How do you work?
Speaking to me?
Asha.
Oh, Asha.
Well, I don't currently have access to the ARP 2500. This was kind of a before life when I was at Brown as a graduate student. But my workflow or my process would really be to turn on a record on a session and let it run for hours and play and explore and see what happened, and then revisit that material later. So that's kind of how I approached generating pieces with the machine. And I think the machine really asks you for your time and attention. As folks have mentioned, sort of transient experience of working with modular synthesis, really asks for you to listen differently. So, I would always just kind of take a long time and see what happens, and then, kind of look at that material later and see what I found interesting or maybe worth sharing with other people.
Is it a mixture of control and certain things are going to respond, and a mixture of daring and you're hoping to create those happy accidents?
One more time, sorry.
Is it a mixture of control where you know what you're going to do next, or is it a mixture of that and happy accidents?
Yeah, I think over time when you're working with a machine or an instrument, you kind of develop paths, ways how to make things happen, and then it's hard to not follow that gravity. But I think the ARP, as other folks have mentioned, there are these happy accidents that happen whether you like it or not. Whether you end up on a bus that you weren't aiming for. You're sending a signal to the wrong place, or a place you didn't imagine sending it to, and then something happens that you really like, and then you kind of figure out what's the logic there, what's actually happening, and that becomes a potential next path or a road that you go down. Or there's just by the nature of the interface, you have to kind of cross paths in order to get to whatever destination you're attempting to get to. So you might find something as you're sliding a switch to your intended final destination. So yeah, I think it's always a mix. Well, it became a mix. When the machine was new, it was definitely just like, what is happening? Let me try to understand the logic of this machine. But I think the ARP really kind of brings you into that space of possibility by nature of its design.
Some of you may realize that we have a world where when something is new, the users are actually very basic on it. And so most of the original first decade of ARP instruments, they were used in a very, I would almost call it a primitive manner, very simple oscillators into filters, maybe a sequence for a few controls. But I see as the same way that, you know, evolution of bicycle riding and skateboarding has changed, and people can do snowboarding in incredible ways. We've learned from the people before us to become more daring, more experimental. And I think with all synths, that's kind of been an evolution, is that the young people come at it with a language that's so broad and dense that they can really jump in and be unafraid to try complex patches. And do you guys feel that's a real thing that's happening in the world now?
Yes.
Well, I'll answer that. I think that the explosion of Eurorack and just the proliferation of all that material has caused an incredible amount of experimentation, and the generation that's coming up right now with electronic music is way more adventurous than, say, that I was, you know, in the 90s and stuff. Like, we were still pretty basic about how we use synths, and now it's kind of like everybody's trying everything. The good thing about, you know, and actually to your point, when you listen to early electronic music, like 2500 is all over. I love that soundtrack. It sounds like you just got a 2500 and just learned how to use it. It's like basic sequence, like exactly what you would do in your first few days. And I think that analog synthesis in general has evolved to such a great degree, and also the access that all these young people have to incredible amounts of material online, Spotify. Like, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't hear the 2500. I didn't hear like all sort of the different types of music that was being made. You know, sort of my electronic music was Kraftwerk and stuff, and I still love it. And now and then later on Stockhausen and stuff, but like now there's like so many people sharing crazy electronic music. I mean, I do have some criticism about that, because I think some sides it's just all experimentation and no editing, and that's always been sort of one of my, you know, like I always think like, oh, it's so cool that you found all these interesting things, but it would be really cool if you curated it in some way that we could listen to it as a piece of music. But you know, you can't have everything, I guess. You know, I mean, that's there are composers, of course, that are going to exalt it and curate it and pick out the fine bits and present them to people in an interesting way. And then there's the people who are really just experimenting and giving us the full totality of their experiments. And I mean, on SoundCloud alone, there's an insane amount of like interesting. I went one day and just was looking through generative music, and I was shocked at how much analog generative music there was. Just people who basically patched like sample and hold modules and like hours of that. You know, I think we're sort of at the dawn of a new age with Eurorack and cheaper and more available synthesizers. Because obviously, when the 2500 was made, I think it was nobody could afford it except for like rock stars and universities. So, I mean, now lots of people can afford analog electronic music equipment, and you're seeing a lot of experimentation. I think the next step for us as a culture is going to be making art that's actually above the technology. Right now, we're just all like so excited, and especially the young. I have a lot of friends that are, you know, they don't care about making music actually. Like they care, but they really care about modules and stuff, and they're all really interested in what the 2500 sounds like. I put up some clips and stuff, and I'll get emails or not text, like they'll contact me through Instagram or whatever, and a lot of times they kind of want to hear like, can you do a demonstration of the filter or something like that? Let me see what it's like. And from my knowledge, nobody's done that yet for the 2500. Including me, because I'm lazy, or I have no time.
I think there's a good parallel also to the visual arts, is you can do great art with a pencil and a piece of paper. So some of the great artists of the past had very limited control or understanding of their synth. But then as we get more into deeper textures and more complex patching and feedback systems, that we can have much more tonal variation and more rhythmic variation, but even maybe less control of it, if you want to call it that. It's less under the personal control and more the machine generating something that you can watch and listen to. I think we're going to throw it over to Pablo for a bit. We're going to have a demonstration from him.
Cool.
Are you there, Pablo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Pablo, are you ready?
Yes. Yes, I'm
Okay.
ready. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like you to introduce what you're going to be doing.
Well, at first, I'm here in Cologne at the Musikhochschule, and I was pleased to discover this instrument that was kind of laying on a corner. Nobody was using it, and I had like to discover it by myself and learn how to use it. And I knew how to program in Max XP, and then with that, I brought like this kind of logic from programming with Max to using the synthesizer, and I was really interested in discovering what the synthesizer could bring to my music instead of thinking like how we would normally compose. Like you imagine a piece first, and then you do the music, you compose the music, and so this was an exploration where the instrument itself gave me like the musical ideas to develop. Yes, so I'm gonna switch to this other camera. Okay.
This is the problem with Zoom. We should all turn on our
Yeah, this was kind of weird.
Wow, great.
Well, thank you. So, well, some small surprises occurred, as you might have seen, but yeah, this was quite exciting to do it live. And such yeah, I must say I was a bit nervous with such a great important people from the history of electronic music here present. It's yeah, it was an honor to be part of this and being able to do this. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay. So at this point, what I'm going to suggest is all panelists that are here, if you could, and that are remaining here for the next 20 minutes or so, we have lots of questions from the audience. I would like to, oops, is that feedback from me?
Cell phone.
What's that?
Cell phone. Move your cell phone.
Huh. Okay.
It's E.T. phoning home.
That's the other movie. Okay, so all right. So yes, please, everyone. Let's go ahead and I want to field some questions. And then before we go, I have one or two more video presentations, and I want to make sure that I give thanks again to all the people that have made this possible. So let's see who is here. Great. Wow. Okay. So, Chris, I know I cut you off at some point, so I would love to start with you if you have any more questions. And then I got some great questions from our attendees. Lori Spiegel has an amazing question, and I would love to make sure we get to as many people as possible.
Let's go ahead and go straight to the attendee questions because we've already had quite a day, and let's move on to what the attendees have to ask.
Okay, welcome, Lori. It's really, really great to have you here. So she's wondering, she's interested in everyone's take on how the ARP, Moog, and Buchla differ from each other. The instrument, the sound, the user community, which I think is a really interesting question, and the music.
Well, our people are the best people.
Oh, yeah, right. Right. Well, I can just say a few overview, the view from 30,000 feet. Those are three distinct cultures. Most notably, Buchla out on the West Coast. But even ARP and Moog are significant subcultures from each other. I can't comment on notions of whether in what way one differs from the other. I'll leave that to you guys because you probably almost anybody else here on the screen has more comprehensive experience of those than I do. But they are three different cultures.
I would suggest that they're not unlike Jaguars, Ferraris, and Maseratis, where they're all great, to be sure, but they all have a different flavor. And certainly what makes the 2500, even as opposed to the 2600, what makes the 2500 so unique is that it's not constrained by anything. It is the most infinite of adjustability of anything on the planet. Oops, sorry, here we go. Where's my video?
We were just
Okay, there's my video. There we go.
There you go.
So it's the most infinite controllable. You're not constrained as you might be, let's say, with the 2600, where you have built-in patches. The 2500, you can do anything you want. Anything can be routed to anywhere. Therefore, you're given this completely immense palette of what you could do or what you could ever do. And so it's a never-ending learning experience, and that's unique in the entire industry.
what would be the difference between that, what you just said about the 2500, and a large Moog modular?
Well, because you run out of patch cords with the Moog.
Yeah,
But-
Well, actually,
I can accept.
that's
Yeah,
an
there would
interesting
be
point.
practical difficulties. Yes, I understand that.
But to be fair, that was an issue with the 2500 as well. As I've heard a few people tell me, they would run out of buses on really complex patches on the 2500.
Well, that, yes. I mean, sure, that would be a very complex patch to be sure. I guess the answer there is buy more stuff.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the fact that with the Buchla, you just didn't go to Buchla if you were intent on doing, say, Bach realizations or actually anything keyboard oriented or tonal.
Could do that, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It just wasn't in the spectrum. It wasn't part of that universe.
I think that the discoverability inherent in the 2500 is its true magic.
Oh,
As was pointed out before, as you operate the slide switches, let's say you're going to position 7, but you go by position 5 and all of a sudden there's a magic thing you never expected to hear. So it's that magic of the discoverability that makes it so unique.
yeah. Yeah. I was watching Pablo very carefully during that performance to see what he was doing. And one thing that really strikes me about modular synthesizers like that is there are two dimensions to working with it. One dimension is what's connected to what. What are the signal paths? Those are mostly yes or no, binary. They're either, you either connect this to, or you don't. And then entirely distinct from that are the continuously variable parameters.
Sure.
Right, and of course, most of that performance consisted of the variable parameters, with the proviso that you can certainly, some of the attenuators you can start down at 0. So you're effectively, when you open it up, you are bringing that into the patch where
Sure.
it hasn't been there before. I used to tell my students to think of that as the connections give you a landscape, and the variables are how you tour through that landscape. One way to think of it anyway.
We did some tests early on when I was teaching an audio class, and we would specifically not listen to the sounds. In other words, we connected up a scope, and I'd say, let's look at a square wave. Now we'll put the square wave through a filter. We close this filter down. Now we see a sine wave. And we start playing with this. And I specifically say, I'm not going to let you hear this. I want you to see what it's doing first. And after you kind of start to understand that, then we're going to listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I used to do something similar in my as a kind of exam. We had a bunch of mini Moogs in the 2600s. I would set up one of them so nobody could see what the control settings were, and I'd fiddle with it and make a sound, and then require the other people, the students in the class, to duplicate that sound without having seen how I did it. Oh, that was fun.
All right. I got a question from Halvard Lund. Do composers use the ARP 2500 textures in a melodical way? This would be a good question for my friend David.
Mm.
Well, I would say that the 2500 is I use it melodically almost all the time, but it's also appeared on some really big historical songs like Rocket Man. All those synths are 2500, and it's all over Who's Next, and it's always playing melodies like on getting in tune, and I've used it a few times on pop songs, you know, for melodic things. It's a very melodic sense. It's actually quite opposite of, like, they were just talking about Buchla and sort of non-keyboard oriented things. I think that the 2500 was designed from I always believed it was designed from a classical musician's perspective. It feels very like specific and keyboard oriented, and it has sort of an exacting quality to it, which makes it actually ideal for melodies. I mean, you can make all kinds of crazy noises on it, and you can certainly do very abstract things with it, but you can also do bass and pads and melodies. And I mean, you know, you're talking about, like, you know, Rocket Man's one of the biggest pop songs of the 70s, and here's the main synth on it is 2500. It's pretty incredible.
And I just want to add that Jim Mitchmerheisen has some classical takes as well.
Yeah.
And these will all be, and I just want to make sure everyone knows, all of the excerpts of videos and all of the sounds that we're referring to are going to be available on the website on a special page. I can't believe how much time has gone by, and we haven't hit everything, but as I like to say, I'd rather leave the party having a good time than be the last one here. So that being said, I do, as we leave, I'm going to be playing an Arp Improvisation by Don Slepian that was recorded at Rectilinear. It's really beautiful. I am moved and honored by all of the attention and work that has come to being here from all of you. This is a sponsored event. We have been, we have some sponsors. Hold on, let me get my, here we go. I'm not going to be playing this yet. Hold on one second. Okay. So I want to make sure that I thank everybody, and I can't bring my page up. Here we go. All right. This has been brought to you by Synth Harmony, who's the initial sponsor for this webinar. The articles are graciously given to us by Learning Modular, and all of them are up with corresponding videos. Virtual 2500 software has been donated to the foundation, and we're very grateful to, and we can't wait to start playing with it. MEAP has supplied us with an enormous amount of resources. You saw one of their videos. We will be having a whole series of other videos that were released today in conjunction with this synthposium. Interage Media Works is responsible for the website. I also want to thank Alex Ball, Philip Rodu, Lisa Belladonna, Rich Formidoni, Mary Locke, Ken McNeil, and Mark Vale. So if you all are out there, I want to thank you very much. So we're going to end with this, and this recording, heavily edited, so all of my snafus can be lost in the ether, will be available in about probably within the week. Any parting words?
Well,
I have a parting word, Dina.
Yes.
What's that?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Last week we featured MEAP on Archives Live, and we have a full tour of their facilities involved. So I will post that again later today on our website. All righty, let's get this show on the road.
And I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. It's been an honor meeting you all.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Dina. Yes, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You